Hey everyone, we're about to dig into one of history's most important, but maybe least flashy inventions. It's this incredible story of how a simple, really powerful idea about farming didn't just feed people, it literally helped build one of the world's greatest civilizations. So, let's get right into it. So, when you think about what makes an empire truly strong, what pops into your head? Is it these massive armies or grand palaces, powerful rulers? And yeah, sure, those things are definitely important, but what if the real engine of civilization is something much quieter? Something happening right under our feet? We tend to look at the sword and the castle as the ultimate symbols of power, but the real foundational strength, the thing that holds everything up, so often comes from the seed and the field. Today, we're going to explore how ancient Chinese farmers managed to harness this hidden power and completely change their world. All right, so our story really begins with the concept that it sounds a bit technical, but it is absolutely revolutionary in its simplicity. It's all about unlocking the full potential of the land. And this wasn't just some new farming technique, it was a total shift in how people thought about the rhythm of the year itself. So, what's the big idea? It's called multiple cropping, and it's pretty straightforward. Instead of planting a field once, harvesting it, and then just letting it sit empty for months, farmers figured out a way to plant, harvest, and then plant again, all within a single year. The goal here was simple but profound. Do not let good land go to waste. I mean, just look at the sheer difference in output this creates. A field that produces food once a year, that's valuable, of course, but a field that can produce food twice or even more, that's a complete game changer. All of a sudden, you're getting so much more out of your land, your labor, and your water. And that's exactly why we call it a quiet revolution, right? It wasn't some dramatic conquest or a stunning new invention you could hold in your hand. It was just learning how to get more harvests from the same fields. And by doing that, these farmers fundamentally changed the economic bedrock of entire regions. So, the big question is, how did they actually pull this off? Well, it took way more than just hard work. It demanded a really clever playbook. This wasn't mindless labor at all. It was a highly strategic, high-stakes operation. And the cycle was absolutely relentless. As soon as that first harvest was in, there was zero time to rest. The fields had to be turned over and prepared for the next sowing, like immediately. Every single one of these stages had to happen at precisely the right moment. A delay of just a week or two could mean the difference between getting that crucial second harvest and a total failure. And you gotta understand, this was not easy. For this whole system to work, you needed this incredible combination of factors. Farmers had to be experts on their local climate. They needed a huge, well-organized workforce. And critically, they had to have the right kinds of crops and almost total control over their water supply. Luckily, they had this fantastic toolbox of crops to work with. Up in the dry north, you had fast-maturing millet, which was a real key player. Later on, wheat became vital because it could grow in the cooler seasons. And then down in the wet south, you had super productive rice grown in these carefully managed paddies, which sometimes even allowed for more than one rice harvest a year. And this brings us to a really critical piece of the puzzle: technology. Specifically, water control. These irrigation systems, they were absolutely essential. You can think of them as an insurance policy against the terrifying risk of a dry spell. A well-watered field wasn't just safer, it was the only thing that could sustain this intense cycle of harvest after harvest. Okay, so farmers are getting way more food from the same piece of land. Why does this matter beyond the farm? Well, because that extra food, that surplus, that's the hidden engine of civilization. It is the fuel that allows societies to get bigger and much, much more complex. This surplus grain did pretty much everything. First and most obviously, it fed a growing population. But then, that extra food could be used to support non-farmers in cities, to feed professional armies, and, of course, to be collected as taxes that funded the entire state. The power of the empire was literally being grown in its fields. This quote just says it all, doesn't it? Every single grand, visible sign of a powerful civilization, from its art and its palaces to its armies, all of it rests on a foundation of agricultural productivity. Without a food surplus, none of it is even possible. And just think for a second about who gets to eat that surplus. When not everybody has to spend their entire life farming just to survive, you get specialization. And this is the birth of a complex society. Now you can have officials running the state, artisans creating incredible things, and scholars developing new ideas. This is literally how a culture grows and thrives.
So ultimately, you can draw a direct line from what's happening in the field to what's happening in the imperial court. The success in those paddies and wheat fields translated directly into power for the rulers. It gave them the resources to build, the resilience to survive a bad year or a famine, and the control they needed to govern a huge territory.
But, and this is a big but, this powerful system was also a massive, high-stakes gamble. It offered enormous rewards for sure, but it was also incredibly fragile. Success was never, ever guaranteed. This really captures that precarious balance perfectly. On one side, you have these huge rewards, more food, more people, a stronger state. But on the other side, you're facing constant risks. A single drought or a bad flood could wipe everything out. The intense labor could exhaust people. And using the land that hard could deplete the soil or encourage pests. It was a constant balancing act. We have to remember, China is a vast place with tons of different climates. This system worked because it wasn't some rigid, one-size-fits-all model. Its true strength was its flexibility. Farmers in different regions were clever, and they adapted the core idea to fit their own unique local conditions. And that, right there, is really the legacy to remember. Multiple cropping represents this profound shift in humanity's relationship with nature. So instead of just accepting one harvest and saying, well, that's what the seasons give us, these farmers learned how to cooperate with the seasons, to actively manage them, and to ask for more. This really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. The most important innovations, the ones that truly change the world, aren't always the loudest or the most dramatic. Sometimes they're quiet, and they're subtle, and they're foundational, like figuring out how to get one more harvest from a single patch of earth. And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. You know, if a simple change in farming patterns could help build an empire thousands of years ago, what are the overlooked, quiet revolutions happening right now that are shaping our future? What is the modern equivalent of that second harvest? That's something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.